Okay. Which war did you serve?
The Iraqi Freedom.
Okay. What was your branch of service?
Army.
And your highest rank?
Captain.
What were some of the general locations that you served in?
All over the place. Schweinfurt, Germany, Seckenheim, Germany, Iraq, Baghdad, east of Baghdad, Fort Leonard Wood, Fort Drum, and that was it.
Okay. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted.
What made you decide to enlist?
I had a friend of mine growing up, going through high school, that was in the reserves, and it kind of appealed to me. So I went on a couple of meetings with him to the reservists, and then also had a recruiter come to one of our classes in high school. Intended to try. Our teacher was trying to give him a opportunity to explain how geometry is used in the military, and the entire thing was actually just a half-an-hour video clip of Army people doing Army things, and you know, I was kind of hooked.
Okay.
So yeah, I decided to enlist, and it was actually my father who introduced me to ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps, where I applied and actually did 4 years in college and graduated, was commissioned as a lieutenant, and joined the Army.
Did your father serve as well?
He did a short period with the Air Force ROTC program at his university, but no, he never served.
Okay. Where were you living at the time?
Well, I grew up in Elkhorn, Wisconsin, and then went to school in Milwaukee, Wisconsin at Marquette University.
Okay. Can you tell me what ROTC was like for you?
ROTC was a lot of fun. It was a bunch of, you know, like I always joked, it was a bunch of people who saw one too many military movies and they thought they knew what the military was. But it was a good opportunity to learn about the Army while still being a college kid. So you got to have fun, but you got to go out and put on the uniform and go do some training at the same time.
Right.
So, yeah, it was a good balance of things.
How often was your training with that?
We did every Friday we had a military lab where we did some training, but we did one weekend every semester where we'd go out and we did field training. So it was, you know, putting out the tents and then going out and doing land navigation and squad maneuvers. It would progress from there. So eventually your junior year, you went out for a 30-day training evaluation out at Fort Lewis, Washington. And so you got to go out and be with a bunch of other cadets from all these other different schools and get evaluated and go through a whole bunch of more training. So, you know, yeah, it was great because you got to go to school, right. But you know, so you got to dip your toe into the military, but then you still got to go out to go have fun and everything with what college affords you.
Okay. What made you decide to pick the Army?
I was too stupid to join the Air Force, and I didn't know enough about the Navy. I mean, I didn't necessarily have a pure preference. In my stupid teenage mind, I kind of logically thought it through as, you know, I wanted to, if anything happened, I wanted to be in combat. But, you know, the Navy, ships can sink, and the Air Force, planes can crash. And at least in the Army, you still got your 2 feet, and you can at least, worst case scenario, you know, walk somewhere. So that was kind of my dumb teenage logic. So I actually applied to Air Force ROTC and Army ROTC, and the letter I got back from the Air Force after I took some evaluation test didn't say it in these words, but basically said, you're too dumb to join the Air Force ROTC. So, you know, they wanted scientists and mathematicians. They didn't want a criminal justice major.
Right.
So, yeah, so that's how, you know, I got offered a scholarship with Army ROTC, and so ran with it.
Okay. So you finished your degree, you got a bachelor's in...
Yeah, I got a bachelor's in criminal justice and a minor in military studies.
Okay. Um, Now let's jump to boot camp after college.
Okay.
Where did you do that?
I did my officer basic course at Fort Knox, Kentucky. Actually, sadly, they don't even do it there anymore. But it was a 6 months training for armor officers. So I spent 6 months living in a hotel room that and then every day up at 6 a.m. doing PT and do classes until 5 o'clock, and then you're off for the day. And
that's how it was for the 6 months, pretty much.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yep. It was we went out and did some field training exercises. We also got a lot of hands-on experience learning how to work with specific weapons, writing operations orders, because as a lieutenant, your job is to be the platoon leader, and so your job is to write the order to tell everybody else what you're going to be doing. So it was a lot of that, a lot of learning military tactics, reading the field manuals, understanding. Back at that time, we were still doing old kind of Cold War or high intensity conflict training. So it was a lot of kind of force on force training, because that was back in 2004. So we really hadn't shifted over the training doctrine quite yet. So
okay,
yeah, it was a lot of time spent in a classroom and time spent on tanks.
Okay. Do you remember any of your instructors?
Vaguely. I mean, I remember faces. I do remember that we did have a Marine captain who was in charge of our class, which was a very interesting experience, because the Marines are a different breed. They're very let's say wound type. They're very deliberate and very dedicated to what they do, and that's one of the reasons I didn't join the Marines. Was you have to have a high drive and a high, focused mindset. I'm more of a laid back guy. And, but he was a very driven man that, he tried to instill in us a lot of, concepts of what's important being a leader.
Right.
I think almost every class that he instructed, the first thing that we did was we learned about, Medal of Honor recipients, lieutenants who were Medal of Honor recipients, and how their dedication to their unit and things like that got them the award. And so it was a lot of lessons learned of, just because you're in charge, you get to make all the sacrifices you can for your soldiers.
Okay. Any memorable, funny experiences from boot camp?
Well, I mean, we spent a week. Yeah, I mean, we spent a week out in the field, and as our culminating event. So, we had, and it still kind of blows my mind. You had 3 lieutenants. So, mind you, a lieutenant is, brand new to the military, unless they're prior service. But I came out of ROTC in college thinking I knew what I was doing, which in reality you really don't. And then I went to officer basic course, which then you really think you know what you're doing, which you really don't. And they took 3 of us, 3 lieutenants, and put us all in an M1A1 Abrams tank, which is a 70-ton tank. That's, I think, $5-6 million piece of equipment. And you had 1 lieutenant driving, 1 lieutenant gunning, and 1 lieutenant as the tank commander. And then you had 1 poor NCO in the loader's hatch who's in charge of trying to tell us what to do or try to keep us safe and not really screw anything up. And it was... I have to laugh looking back, because you got a guy who knows what he's doing, is in the least important seat in the tank, and really capable of not capable of stopping anything. So you have three lieutenants running around in these 70-ton equipment, just driving crazy and not knowing what they're doing. So there were times, one of the guys, we were driving around, and we thought we knew what we were doing, so the driver's gunning it up a little bit, revving it up, and then the gunner's not really paying attention, and so we buried a tank barrel into the mud, because we're supposed to be going up a hill. So instead of elevating, instead of the tank commander telling the gunner elevate the barrel, because he didn't know any better, he just drove that thing right into the mud hole and got stuck. There's times and then you got guys who. We didn't know where the bogs. It's a 70-ton vehicle. You need heavy ground to be on. Somebody drove one into a bog and just sunk it up to the turret. We went out to gunnery, and we're trying to do this stuff, and you got these. It was funny as heck because you got these deaf deer running through the range where all these rounds are flying down range, these big tank rounds, and those deer just didn't care. And so yeah, I mean, it's amazing none of us got seriously injured at the time, but no, it was a great time. It was a lot of fun.
Okay. After Fort Knox, where did you head off to?
I went off to Schweinfurt, Germany, to join 1-4 Cavalry Squadron in Heidelberg or Schweinfurt, Germany.
Okay.
And from there, it was one of these interesting things because I showed up. The unit was already deployed down to what was called the Triangle of Death at the time, down south of Baghdad, near Mosul and stuff. And so I thought right away I was going to be showing up and I was going to be just shipping out. So I'm trying to steel my mind and prepare for that kind of eventuality. And actually ended up being on the rear detachment. So when a unit deploys, you have a group of soldiers that stay behind to basically keep the home fire going and keep things running, and then also support the people down range. So if they need something, they can send it down there. They also take the new people that come in and they get them all trained up and stuff. So, I went through officer basic course, an armor's officer basic course where I learned how to shoot, 50 cal machine guns and drive tanks. And I wound up being the supply officer for my rear detachment, not knowing anything about supply operations. And spent 6 months with a very competent and very patient sergeant first class who took care of me and, schooled me up. And then from there, I was a platoon leader for a while. And then I went back I did such a good job as a supply guy. I went back into the supply office to help out with the transition. And then, the way the military works, our manning requirements changed. And so all of a sudden, as they were getting ready to go back to deploy to Iraq, which, anybody who joined up at that time, that's what we all wanted to do. I got told, and actually myself and all the other first lieutenants got told, listen, we're supposed to have infantry lieutenants. Congratulations. You guys got to go find somewhere else to go. So I actually, as an armor officer, wound up working for a military police criminal investigation division down in Heidelberg, Germany, of all places. Because at that time, the army doesn't care what you want. So needs of the army always come first. So that's how I wound up calling the personnel office and saying, okay, well, hey, I'm an armor guy. Send me to an armor unit. And they said, no, nothing's open over here. So, they looked at us as what we called free chicken. And so I wound up down to the, CID command. A buddy of mine wound up over at a training and doctrine command over in Vilseck, Germany. Another guy wound up working for the inspector general, and another guy wound up as a general's aide somewhere. So all of us just got piecemealed off into these positions that people needed, but they weren't important during a wartime effort. So yeah, that was my time in Schweinfurt.
So what would you do on a day-to-day in supply and then the military police?
Well, I mean, as a supply guy, it was getting up, doing the normal stuff, getting up, joining the unit for physical training in the morning, and then you wind up you get to the office, and so the first batch of stuff that I was doing was I was going through all the old equipment that we had there at the unit, and I was turning it all in and getting stuff kind of cleaned up, taking inventories of things, ordering things that needed to be ordered, and managing all the paperwork. And then, when I was a platoon leader, it was same things, getting up, doing PT in the morning, and then doing whatever training needed to be done with the guys, taking, each of the tank crews down. Well, actually, I mean, there was about a weekly rotation where it was, Monday morning, you're always in the motor pool, doing your maintenance on all your equipment, and then you start doing some of your training and development stuff. And then, that all culminated with going out and doing field exercises to get certified with the platoon. So, at that time, You know, it's going out to the rifle ranges, getting your weapons qualified, going out and doing manned patrols. Basically, all the stuff to get yourselves qualified and trained back up to start getting ready to deploy again.
Okay. So as platoon leader, you directed all the guys below you? Yeah,
you go in, you went into the troop commander's office because the cavalry, it's not a, platoon, company, battalion. It's platoon, troop, squadron, because we still harken back to the old cavalry days when there's still horses. But it was exactly that. You go into your troop commander's office in the morning. He'd give you what needed to be done. Y'all talk about all the stuff that needed to take place, and then it was go out and supervise your guys to make sure it all gets accomplished.
Okay. And how was living conditions in Germany?
Beautiful. It's a weird setup where, because I was a single officer, I was not allowed base housing, which actually turned out to be an amazing opportunity, because I lived in a apartment in a farmhouse in a little town called Hambach, to the northwest of Schweinfurt, I think. But so I lived in this picturesque little German town in Schweinfurt in Hambach that I had a church down the street with the church bells. And then it was just, peaceful out in the country. And then I had a little shop down the street from me that I could get up in the morning on weekends, and I could walk down there and get some fresh breakfast. it was a great opportunity. Being in Europe was the best time I ever had in the military, because you get to go out and experience European lifestyle and still be what I called the pocket of America, because we still had the post exchange, the PX. You still had the dining facilities on post. You still had the commissary. So, if I wanted butterscotch pudding and mac and cheese, I could go to the commissary and get butterscotch pudding and mac and cheese. But in Germany, they don't have those things. So it's a best of both worlds. You get to experience Europe, but still have this little pocket of America where I can get my Taco Bell and my McDonald's and all that other stuff. So it was great.
How close were you to where the rest of the guys slept?
I was about 10-15. I was about a 10-15 minute drive to our base. So I wasn't hours away or anything like that. But that's what they do. If you're a single officer, you don't get to stay in the barracks like you do for your single NCO or non-commissioned officer or enlisted guy. So yeah, we had a housing office that you'd go to, and they'd give you a list of places to go look at. You got to go pick your poison and go live where you wanted to live.
Now, was this on the old eastern front of Germany?
No, this is Schweinfurt is like the smack dab middle of Germany on a map. So it wasn't quite. It was kind of the eastern front back in the day. It's one of the reasons it was there. But it was nowhere near Berlin or anything like that. So, but yeah, I think now I think about it, yeah, actually it probably was the old East Germany, West Germany kind of line. But yeah, that's what a lot of the old military bases were, was they were just to harken back to the occupation, the division from World War II, and then eventually the Cold War setup.
Did you ever go into the old Eastern Germany, and was it a big difference from where you were living?
No, holistically in East versus West Germany, no, it really wasn't. But I did have an opportunity to go to Berlin, and East and West Berlin is like a night and day difference. Like if you go over to Berlin, they still have the cobblestones where the wall used to be, but you don't really even need that. You can just, if you look on the west side, it's kind of this, vibrant architecture, and you just go to the east side, it's all square. It's all square, single window, and everything looks just very regimented and very organized. Okay. So, yeah.
So how long would you say you were in Germany total?
3 years. 3 years and some change. So I did Schweinfurt with the cavalry, and then I got transferred down to Heidelberg. So I spent 2 years in Heidelberg. Yeah, two and change maybe, working a desk job there. So Schweinfurt was great. Heidelberg was even better because it's a tourist town with a lot of history to it. A lot of people go there to visit. And it was just a great opportunity to, again, live in a place where on Saturday morning I'm down near a 800-year-old church eating breakfast on a cobblestone courtyard that's been there for centuries.
Right.
So, yeah.
And then after Germany, did you go right to Iraq? Or
Yeah, the unit that I was in Heidelberg was a non-deploying unit. So I never, so it was a command unit that operated solely in Germany. So at the time I knew I was getting ready to go back for my captain's career course training. So I knew that there was no way I wanted to go back to captain's career course without having deployed, because that's what everybody was doing, and I wanted to do my part. So at the time I took something called an individual augmentee deployment. And so what it is you're basically a guy going down to fill a position in a unit that's already there. So I wound up going down and taking a position in the detainee task force down there in Baghdad. Where from Germany I went straight to Baghdad. I spent a year doing detainee operations, and then I came back to Germany for a hot second, and then shipped back off to the States.
Okay. Would you like to talk about how your day-to-day was in Iraq?
My first deployment, I was very fortunate where, I was not getting shot at a regular basis. I was not in gunfights. I was not kicking in doors. I was not on the tip of the spear, as it were. My first deployment was essentially, I was in Arizona. I mean, it was a city. Pretty much a city. I was in Camp Victory, which was part of the ring of bases around the Baghdad airport. Where, when I first showed up, I was like one of those. If you ever saw, We Were Heroes once, the end of the movie where all the reporters show up, and like one artillery shell lands, and they all freak out. Like that was me coming off the plane. But, I was on a very secure post that did not have too many opportunities to get yourself into harm's way. So it was a managerial job where my job was essentially, I was a kind of, part of it was that I was a digital postman. I received requests for information to our unit and I distributed them out. But my job was kind of a 14-hour day in an office building, doing important work, but it was not on the front line, in hazards, in harm's way by any stretch. So yeah, it was just, it was 6.5 days a week, going into the office every day, doing as much work as we could, and then going home at the end of the day, and after dinner, doing a little bit more, and then going home about 7 o'clock at night, and then getting up and doing the whole thing all over again.
And about what year was this? 2000?
Yeah, 2008, 2009. Yeah, it was 8 to 9. Okay. Yeah, February to February.
So this was your first deployment to Iraq?
Yep.
And then you came back to the States?
Yeah, I came back to the States. I went through my captain's career course down at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And did 6 months of training there. And then because my first deployment, I started to get to know my now wife. She was up in Long Island, New York. So when it came time for the training to get done, they offered us a list of positions. So normally with the military, it's needs of the Army, then where you're needed. And then if you have you want to do something, you can ask nicely, but very few and far between does that happen. So we got the opportunity to take a look at the list of opportunities out there that they needed captains at. And so I picked Fort Drum, New York, because it was close to my future wife. And so just happened that, that unit was deploying too. So I wound up kind of doing a back-to-back, came back to the States for a hot minute, hung out at Fort Drum for about a month and a half, and then I just shipped right back down to east of Baghdad.
Okay. How difficult was the captain career training course?
Going into the cafeteria, so you always get majors who love to tell, when I was getting my date and stuff, all these majors told me, oh, it's a gentleman's course. It's going to be this nice, you get to wake up in the morning and take a nice, you get to go to class for a bit. And you guys get to philosophize about being leaders. And then you go back to your, you can go back to your house, or you can go play golf in the afternoon. My campus career course was anything but. It was PT at 4:30 in the morning. No, it was 5:30 in the morning to 6:30 was PT. In the classroom by 7. Classroom from 7 to 5 p.m. And then on top of that, they offered a master's course you could start taking. So towards the end of my campus career course, it was PT at 5:30 to 6:30, classroom at 7 to 5, and then from 7 to 10 was a master's program at night. So I pretty much lived off of Red Bull and 5 Hour Energy for about 3 months there. So it was pretty rough, but they definitely crammed a lot of information into it.
Right.
So yeah, it was a good experience. It was a lot. There was no field training like it was for our officer basic course, but it was a lot of classroom, a lot of doctrine, a lot of papers and thought process. So a lot of thinky stuff.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, and then you went back to Fort Drum for like a month or so?
Yeah, a month turned into 2. I finally deployed. We had to go through all this stuff, and we had to go through all this, again, all this kind of gear up training to prove that we could be certified and stuff. And then we got done around Christmas time. I think I deployed was it Christmas Day that I deployed? Yeah, I think it was Christmas Day. And we spent New Year's in Kuwait. So then
2011?
No, it was 2009. 2009.
Okay.
Into 2010. So yeah, it was again. It was actually kind of funny because much like the first deployment, getting there was a lot of hurry up and wait. So I show up to Fort Drum. I showed up with almost everything that I needed to go, ready to go, and they were like, "Nah, you got to hang out." So it was a couple of months living in a hotel, and then it was okay, ready to go. But then we got to Kuwait, and then it was okay, we got to wait a couple weeks here in Kuwait, and then it was get to Baghdad, and then from Baghdad they had to piecemeal all of our guys because I left with 30 something soldiers that I was in charge of because I was the senior ranking officer. So I got to herd the kittens for a while, but and then it was we piecemealed people off to all their different units. So when we showed up to Baghdad, I showed up to as part of 2nd Brigade, 10th Mountain Division. But of course, the brigade has battalions under it, and then those battalions have companies. So everybody's kind of the brigade gets a piece of the pie, and then they're supposed to control that piece of the pie. Well, to control it, now you got different units in different areas. So we had to take and put privates on different helicopters all the time and get them out to all these different locations. And, it actually is kind of one of those funny things where, you're putting a kid on some 18-year-old kid on a helicopter with like 6 duffel bags worth of stuff. And you're just kind of hoping he knows where to get off. Like, cause it wasn't, it's not like they're taking him straight there. It's, you're flying here, and then the helicopter's going to land here, and then there, and then maybe, and so unless the crew chief on the helicopter's paying attention, that kid probably half the time I had no idea where some of those kids wound up. I just kind of crossed my fingers and was like, well, good luck to you. See ya.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a fun time. I mean, there was a couple of times that I almost got off at the wrong place, because in Iraq they got something called the ring route where there's direct flights to places where these aviation guys are moving people around, but there's also what's called the ring route, and all those poor guys are doing is they're literally the Airbus, and they're dropping here and they're flying here and then picking up and dropping off. So there's a couple of times I took that, and if you're not paying attention, you don't know where you're going or where you're going, what it looks like. Yeah, you can, I got the door open. I put a couple of feet off on, got a foot off on the ground, looked around, and I was like, nope, this ain't it. Grabbed the crew chief. I'm like, hey, is this here? And he's like, no, it's the next stop. So, quick jump back on the bird. Otherwise, you got to make a phone call. You're like, hey, I'm stuck. fob whatever. Gotta wait for the next ring round. I'll be there in a couple hours.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting time sometimes.
So how was it different your second time around being captain? And
my first position. Well, I was a captain the first time I went down, and so I was on a high-ranking, general level command. So, it's a part of the machine. The second time around, I was at a different, obviously a different base, but the second time it was a lot quieter. By that point in time, the conflict had started to really draw down. Our job became to start transitioning our locations off to the Iraqis. So it was a lot of the Iraqis took the lead. We were in an observation role. So, but yeah, it was different in that one, I was working out for a brigade. So, but I was also the provost marshal for this brigade, the provost marshal office. So my job was to be the liaison and advisor on all things military, police related. So it was a lot of, some investigations here and there. We did a lot of just coordinating military dog missions and things like that. So it was a lot of oversight and just communicating with the different units and just being an advisor to the commander. So, but as I said though, it was a lot quieter. We didn't come under attack once the whole time we were there. So it was it was different. It was almost enjoyable. Like the fear was not necessarily there, that edge to at any moment we could come under attack. So yeah, it was almost nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was your day-to-day like this time? It was the shuffling around of the people.
Yeah, it was a lot of just office stuff, dealing with, some investigations here and there, coordinating, make sure everything was coordinated. And then I got transitioned to be the battle captain for the Tactical Operations Center, the TOC. So it was, so as I was doing that, I was on a night shift. And so it was a lot of just filing the reports that needed to be filed when they needed to be filed, tracking some of the guys out in the area, any movement that was going on, you're tracking any kind of convoys that are coming or going. But, as I said, it was not a very chaotic experience. The TOC is the command center where all the information should be coming and going. And during like a combat operation, that could be a very hectic place because you got to control what's going on, and at any time the commander should be able to come in and you should be able to tell them what exactly is going on, who's in contact with what's where, who needs help. But I mean, at that time it was really just like a nightly convoy was coming and going. A couple of EOD units were out in the area doing maybe some road patrols, but there was not as much chaos. So it was, just a lot of the standard stuff, sending the reports, providing the updates, making sure the information, all the information the higher wants gets submitted. Okay.
So after the second time, you went back to the States?
Yep. Came back to Fort Drum.
And that's where you got out of the service?
Yeah, did a couple of years of service there, and then just kind of decided I've had enough. I did 8 years in, and decided to hang up my spurs.
Now, did you live on base there, or is that when you bought your house?
Yeah, no, that's when I bought my house. So again, it was single officer, so I don't get afforded the opportunity to live on base housing. So I picked up an old farmhouse that was a stone's throw from the airfield, and years later, about 5 years now I've owned it. Let's see, bought it in 6 years, 5 and change.
Okay.
No, 6, because I bought it in October. So it was October 2010 when I bought it. So
Okay. Did you end up seeing any combat while you were over there?
Yes and no. My first deployment, we got mortared on kind of a regular basis. So, I mean, that is, I guess, quasi, combat. But from a, we're under attack, Black Hawk Down kind of scenario, no, I never saw that kind of combat. I never was, running door to door and any kind of running gunfight or anything like that.
Okay. Let's see. Were you awarded any medals or citations?
Yeah. You get, I got a Bronze Star Medal, an Army Commendation, two or three Army Commendation Medals, an Army Achievement Medal, Iraqi Campaign Medal for my participation over there. And, and then the standard, the Global War on Terrorism, National Defense Service Medal. The kind of stuff. It's actually kind of funny because, you graduate officer basic course, you haven't done anything, and they're giving you ribbons like, here's your National Defense Service Medal. It's like, I haven't done anything.
Right.
So, yeah, you got the standard stuff that everybody gets upon, graduation and stuff. Okay. So, but yeah, you get awards every time you leave. Every time you leave a unit, you usually get some kind of acknowledgement, some kind of service award for what you're doing. So, but there are also medals for valor, but I didn't get any of those.
How did you get the Bronze Star?
For my service, my first deployment, actually, it was for exceptional meritorious service in doing detainee operations.
Okay. Is there a good story behind that you'd like to share? Or?
No, I mean, it was really just taking on a lot. We were a unit that had probably 5 or 6 different captains, and we probably should have had a staff of 60. So it was a continual just whatever came up needed to get done. One of us would pick up the slack and run with it. So it was never a dull moment. So my day-to-day stuff was doing this kind of request for information. But I was also writing communications for, communication responses for embassies asking for information about possible, potential detainees. I was doing a side project with the embassy and other governmental agencies. So at one point in time, a buddy of mine and I joked what we started to do to kind of show our frustration with how much we were doing. We started putting everything that we were doing as our signature block on our emails, and so we started off with I was just the RFI manager, and then it became the RFI manager, operations order manager, detainee information manager, and so we started just putting all these different information or whatever titles that we were doing. But and then there was times where it was all hands on deck with what was going on. So. At one point in time, the Iraqis decided to attack somewhere that didn't even bother to tell the Americans, and they just decided, we're going to go invade this, take back this area. And it turned into a very stressful time where we were trying to figure out how we could assist, the command structure. And it was, I think, a day and a half of just pure planning and pure running through all of the decision-making process. And so, yeah, there's a lot of times where it was drop everything you're doing and jump through hoops. And then there was other times that it was, your standard stuff. So it was that. And so part of the other reason, I guess, was because my first deployment was only meant to be a 6-month stint. It was only meant to be this little 6-month deployment. And towards the end of my 6 months, the colonel at the time came up and kind of pulled me aside and he goes, "Hey, you're doing a good job. We could really use you for a little bit. You want to stay a little bit longer?" I was like, stupidly, I was like, "Yeah, sure, let's go for it." So I signed up for another 6 months of time over there, and so I think that also probably paid dividends. And of course, true to fashion, Yeah, I didn't mind the 6 months, but about a week into the second 6 months, all I kept thinking was, what was I thinking? So, but it was so it was quite an opportunity.
How did you stay in touch with your family and your soon-to-be future wife?
Actually, we had Iraqi internet. Actually, we could pay for So like I mentioned earlier, I was not living on a desolate forward operating base. I was in the middle of a pretty robust city, living in a containerized housing unit with another guy. So a dorm room living kind of setup. And you could actually pay, I think it was like $30 a month, and this Iraqi guy ran a cable, and then you had internet. And so, it was this crazy setup where, you paid a little bit of money and you could have the internet in your chew. So that's how I stayed in contact. It was a lot of emails and FaceTime and stuff. And also you have the non-secure phone lines, and you can make calls back to the States if you get an opportunity. So that's kind of how I stayed in touch.
Did they monitor what they said to you or what you could release?
There's set things like, obviously there's certain things like the biggest one is you're not supposed to talk about any kind of transport stuff back and forth, when you're redeploying or when you're deploying is two big OPSEC things. But you're supposed to, you don't talk about everything. A lot of what I did on the day-to-day was there was a lot of classified secret information. So, you don't get up and be like, yeah, you won't believe what this dumb, what guy we captured today, you won't believe who we got in the unit today. But, it was just a lot of, hey, yeah, and that's kind of a bit of a problem, I think, was because I was doing a lot of office stuff that was classified. But even I can imagine for anybody doing even combat stuff, you can't give away too much. And so a lot of the conversations were merely like, yep, going to work, yep, So, I guess the good news is my family and I were close, but we're not we don't need to talk a lot. So it was just, hey, how's it going? It's going good. How's home? So it was kind of, a lot of one-sided conversations. But, that was about it.
That's good. How about the food? Was it different between Germany and Iraq?
Germany, we had German food. But Iraq, I go back to, I was very fortunate where I lived on a base that had a huge dining facility. There were guys out there who were getting, meals, something called a mermite, which is essentially taking something and boiling it and then putting it into a container and then transporting it out somewhere. So, they don't really get an option of what they want to eat or anything like that. But I lived on, Camp Victory. We had surf and turf every Friday night. I had this little contracted guy who was making, made to order grilled cheese sandwiches. So that's actually one of the first places I learned to eat a Reuben, because the guy had sauerkraut, corned beef, and Swiss cheese and rye bread. I was getting Reubens every Friday night. So yeah, it was very good. For all things considered, we had a very, very comfortable at Camp Victory.
Okay. Did you always have enough supplies?
There was one point, it goes back to, when the Iraqis decided to invade an area to try and take it back without letting the Americans know. There was a bit of a shortage, and it was it made me chuckle a little bit because, people, when I deployed, I expected to be eating meals ready to eat out of box. I expected to be living in a tent. I expected to be, having really roughing it. And so when I showed up to Camp Victory, I was, that was very eye-opening. But then there were other soldiers there who probably didn't even want to deploy that wound up. And so, the supplies got a little short during that period. And I was joking that, we went from fresh produce on the salad bar to canned fruit cocktail to, you know, and then all of a sudden the ice cream bar started, and I was like, oh no, you know, it's like we're in a combat zone. But other people, you know, I chuckled because other soldiers were like, this is unexcusable. And I'm like, dude, you're in Baghdad, calm, you know. But yeah, no. So I mean, that was about the only time that we really ran low on supplies.
Okay. Did you ever feel pressure or stress?
Yeah, I mean, you work long and hard enough continually. You know, I didn't think I was that stressed out until I got back from my deployment, and I came back, and my boss at the time at my unit, when I came back, said, you know, oh, you going to take some time off? I was like, nah, I did an office job. I don't need any time off. And I came back, and for about 2 weeks, I felt like I always had to continually be doing something, because you get used to that kind of that cycle. And then after about 2 weeks of being home, I crashed. I mean, I could not. I slept for like 4 days straight, where my body finally was like, "Oh, we're no longer," you know, because you do have this heightened sense of, especially if you're in a position like I was, where all you're getting is mortars and rockets coming in. So you don't even have an opportunity to release that stress by actually engaging an enemy. So you just get to play, as I called it, the mortar lottery, and just hope that mortar's not going to land anywhere near you. So that you know, there's almost defensive, you know, this helplessness to a degree. So yeah, it was a little stressful, but I mean, after a while, you get used to it. It's nothing new.
Okay. How did you guys handle or entertain yourself, rather?
Videos. I mean, movies. We entertained ourselves. You know, we had a good stack of DVDs, and a lot of kind of what I did in college. Actually, a lot of playing like Command and Conquer video games with a buddy online. I mean, that was, you pass your time with the internet, and we actually smoked a lot of cigars. Actually, we started up a cigar club when I was there, my first deployment. So, for about an hour a day, we went outside, you smoked a cigar, you got to relax, and then, you went back to work.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's how we kind of passed the time. That and, going to the gym, but, yeah.
Did they have any USO shows?
They did, but it's one of those where it was, where they held the USO shows was a little ways away from us. It wasn't like it was definitely not within walking distance. And I just never really felt the urge to go to any of that kind of stuff because, I'm working long hours. All I really want to do is go back to my rack and take a nap.
Okay. Did you ever get to go on leave?
Yep. Yeah, I came back to Germany for 2 weeks. Came back to Germany, spent those 2 weeks snowboarding in the Alps, and then I went back to Iraq. Oh, yeah, it was very nice.
Okay. Did you come back to the States, or you got one leave?
No, I just came back to... I never... My first deployment, I thought it was only going to be 6 months initially, so I never even moved my stuff out of my apartment. Okay. So I had my apartment still in Germany, and I had no real reason to go back stateside because, at that time, all my friends were in Germany. So it just, when 2 weeks came up, it was, come on back to Germany, hang out at the house for a bit, go to Switzerland, go snowboarding, and then go back to Iraq.
Okay. Now, since your service ended and you already owned a house in Fort Drum, how was your last day in service?
It was. I mean, it's like any other job you go to quit. I mean, it was go to work, kind of look around, appreciate what you did, and then, just head on back to the house. I mean, at that point in time, as I was getting ready to leave, I had a lot of leave saved up. So, I mean, my last 2 months in the military was really, I was just on vacation for 2 months. But, as I was transitioning out, I was also doing interviews for jobs and stuff and figuring out where I wanted to go. And the fortunate thing is, wherever you end up, the military gives you one last move after you're out. So you kind of get your final destination. So even owning the house, it was all right. I put it up on the market for a while. Army came and moved all my stuff out to Connecticut, where I am now, and that was that.
So right after you ended, you moved here?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I actually already had the job lined up to start, almost right as I was leaving. So there was almost no lag time between the Army and starting my new job.
What made you pick Waterbury, Connecticut?
Actually, it was funny because we picked Waterbury, Connecticut because my wife and I, neither one of us know Connecticut very well. But we picked Waterbury because it was at the end of the road after a long day of looking at houses starting in New Haven and just driving north. That's where Bridgeport. We were in Bridgeport. We started driving up 8, and about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we got to Waterbury. We're like, look, a mall. Look, a grocery store. We're done. We'll stay here. So that's actually how we wound up in Waterbury.
Okay. Did you use your GI Bill for school or house?
Not yet. I did use my VA. Yeah, I did use the VA home loan for the house that I own. But really what I want to use the GI Bill for is to try to learn how to be a carpenter. The problem is, one, it's expensive, and two, like doing the research initially in this area, just looking into it, the only place that I found that would take the GI Bill, or the GI Bill could be offered for it, because you have to, you can't just use the GI Bill for any kind of program. It has to be an accredited institution. But the only place I found was a school up in Maine, where the only piece of their program was a 6-month internship where you move there and you do in high intensity 6 months of learning all of the carpentry skills that you need. Very cool. At my age, and my current employer, I highly doubted they're going to just give me 6 months to go do something and then let me come back. So, it's one of those where I'd love to use it for that, but I just haven't had the opportunity.
Right. Did you keep any close friendships in service?
Yeah, actually, funny enough, I still talk to an old sergeant that I was when I was a platoon leader. An old sergeant of mine. We still keep in contact pretty regularly. 3 of my good friends from college, we all went through ROTC together. We're all still in contact. And then we even picked up a straggler along the way, my buddy Dan. So it was an amazing stint of luck where, I went through ROTC with my friend Greg, my friend Jake, my friend Mike Miller, and we all, and just by happenstance, my friend Greg and my friend Jake also went through Armor Basic course at a different time, but we all came into the Armor branch. And then I met my friend Dan when I was going through my Officer Basic training course. And then I went to Schweinfurt, Germany. And then Greg and Dan wound up in it's going to come to me. They wound up in one of the army units down in the southwest of Germany. And then Jake wound up in the same area. So, I mean, it was every kind of 3 or 4 day weekend. We were all jumping on planes together and we were going out and seeing the sights and touring and stuff. So guys I met in college and guys I met in the Officer Basic course, also we're all in Germany together. And then, yeah, I actually, even on my deployment, I met some friends of mine that I still definitely keep in contact. My friend Carl, who's down in Oklahoma, my friend Leanne, who's out in California. Yeah, we all still keep in touch.
Nice. Did you join any veterans organizations? Not
here. I still have wanting desires to join like the VFW and the American Legion, but I wanted to. I just never got around to it here because I never thought I was going to be here this long. So, but yeah, once I get down to Atlanta, I'm definitely going to be signing up for all that.
Okay. And what is your career after your service?
I originally took a job selling truck tires, commercial truck tires, and did that for about 3 years. And now actually I've transitioned over, and now I'm going to be selling cable and internet to businesses down in the Atlanta area.
Nice.
So doing sales. A lot of guys when they get out, like a lot of my friends, all of them are right now they're doing managerial positions. So my friend Greg, he manages a industrial mixing plant. My friend Devin, he's doing, I think, Solo cups or something like that. He's managing a cup production company. My friend Mike's doing some kind of manufacturing. But a lot of, one of the things that are in high demand is you get a person who has been through a lot of different odd duck scenarios, being a leader and being flexible and able to make decisions. A lot of companies out there really value that kind of leadership, and so a lot of guys, when they get out, they'll end up taking managerial positions.
That's good.
Yeah, I branched off. I got tired of I got tired of having to deal with other people's problems, so I went a different route. I took sales just because, I get to be on my own and make my own decisions and be more flexible that way. But a lot of guys go into managerial stuff.
Yeah. Okay. How did your military experience influence your thinking about the war or military in general?
Like anything else, when you get to see how the sausage is made, you get to experience it. When you get to experience it firsthand, you get a different understanding and a different a different view of it and a different appreciation. Being in the military, you get to see what it's really like. And so, it's like any other thing in this world where, when you become a part of it, you don't see it in the same kind of awestruck light as other people. I have a lot of people who, I wanted to join the military. I wanted to be a part of it, and I wanted to go out and go support and defend. And I still, to this day, like, if somebody finds out I'm a veteran, they're like, "Oh, thank you for your service." And it's like, I didn't, I did this because I wanted to. I didn't do this because I had to. So, there's certain things that I think, being part of it, I think was ridiculous. I think was silly. But it definitely gives you an appreciation for what they have to do on a daily basis.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
No, not really. I probably like everybody else. There's days that I miss it, and then there's days that I miss the fun parts, and there's days that I'm glad I'm not doing the stupid parts. So it's definitely something that was worthwhile. And my wife would probably kill me if I said this, but hey, if one of my kids growing up thinking about joining the military, I'll support their decision if they want. I'll definitely tell them what it's really like, but recruiters do a good job of showing you all the pretty parts. They don't definitely highlight the pain in the butt parts, but it's one of those things that I was definitely glad I did it.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you for your service and for the time for this interview today.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.